All right. What are the 5 functions of bone? Support, protection, movement. To what? Store what? Specifically? Not quite yet. What's that? What do you need to make bones? Calcium and fats and potassium. Some potassium. Yep. And then what? Red marrow. Somebody said marrow. Produces blood cells. I think you hit all of them. Okay. We'll just go back. Yep. Support and protection. Ribs protect the thoracic organs like the heart and lungs. Skull protects the brain, obviously. Movement, they act as levers. So if you remember back, you guys talk about levers in physical science? Well, it acts as a lever, and it increases the efficiency of your muscles. Body movement, yeah, like it allows for movement of your elbows. We talked about this. And then blood cell formation. The reason, I don't know if you touched on this, but the reason bone marrow is in your blood and it produces the red blood cells is because that's the best your body can do to protect the blood cell production, the bone marrow, from the UV rays from the sun. So it's the darkest in there. It's not going to get any UV rays that cause cancer or stuff like that. So that's the best it can do. It hides it in the bones. Joint, we talked about this, right? No? Okay. So joints are the junctions between bones. Did I miss one? Well, yeah, storage doesn't look. Storage is not on there. Storage. Yep. Okay.
And then there's like blood. So.
It's like skipping like 2 or 3
Okay.
slides.
So support, we're good.
Yeah.
Movement, good.
Yeah.
Still movement. Blood cell formation. That is.
Like that's
And then after that, there should be like 2 more slides before going.
Oh. Well, let me see what I can talk about it then. We'll come back to that. That's good? Sound good? Yeah. Okay. He's not here. We haven't done joints yet, right? Okay, all right. Yeah. So he said the terms he uses: immovable, slightly movable, and movable joints. You can hear, sometimes you hear joints that don't move, like in your skull, as fixed joints. They're stuck together. But we'll call them immovable joints just to make it easy. Allows for, so during childbirth, the baby's head is the largest part. So basically, in pregnancy in humans, we keep them in as long as possible until they're just barely able to get out. And that's because, so basically they're born premature. Their brains don't work that well. And that's why you see, like, baby horses can walk, 6 hours after they're born, whereas baby humans take a year. I'm not sure when babies usually walk, but it takes much longer. It's because our brains are so large that we basically have to get pushed out before we're ready. And then types of joints, so they're slightly movable, found in the rib cage and vertebra, or bray. And that just allows for slight flexation, like you get hit in the ribs. It's not going to break a rib immediately unless it's enough. Fixed, we talked about it in the skull, not moving. Same thing with the pelvis. So there's the sacrum and the os coxa. So right here, there's a fixed joint in between there. It does not move. And then there's movable joints where we all know, elbow, knee, that kind of stuff. Oh, I see, okay. I don't know if I was supposed to move on to here. Now that I think about it. So we will talk about, yeah, that's my bad. But you're already ahead of the game. We're going to go back, I believe. Can you flip over the page? Yeah, okay, we're going to go to this right here. Do we usually talk about that? Yeah, with that. Yep. Okay, so let's talk about that. And I'm guessing the PowerPoint is not on that. Okay, yeah. I'm going to shut that off if I know how. Everybody has this, right? Okay, I'm going to erase it. Hey, there it is. You might need to grab a book if you don't have one already. Everybody has one. All right, okay. Yep. So we're going to start with, what's the first thing on here? Oh, I have this. I don't know why I'm looking. I'm just making sure it lines up. The cervical, let's talk about the curvatures. So the reason your spine, does anybody have a guess why your spine has curvatures? So what would happen, I'm going to draw a very basic, that's a spine, right? Or a vertebral column. What would happen if you landed really hard on your butt and a bunch of energy just came straight up through it? It might fracture some of the bodies of the vertebrae. Whereas, so it goes like, this is your head. Oh my gosh, that's terrible. That's your head. Okay, so your neck starts right here, and it comes in, and it gets to your thoracic, and it comes back in after your lumbar. And I'll break it down a little better, and then your sacrum. So that's going to be your sacrum. And then your lumbar would be right there-ish. Thoracic. I spelled that wrong. Yes. Thoracic, and then cervical. So if I were to land, or if someone were to land on their butt in this case, then, I'm drawing force. The force of the energy wouldn't transfer straight up through it. The spine can act as a spring almost, an organic spring to soften that impact and not just send it completely through the bones. Does that make sense? I didn't explain it perfectly great, but that's the idea. So the curvatures are for impact absorption. And when you're walking around all day, it'll build up. If it was straight up and down, it builds up. Whereas this makes it easier on us. Everybody clear on the curvatures? So cervical comes out. It just it's like a wave. So cervical that way, and it comes back, and then lumbar comes back, and then sacrum. All right. Cool. So let's talk about the vertebrae themselves. So what are the top two vertebrae called? Atlas and the axis, yep. And so What page is it? Turn to page 229. And so the top vertebrae there is the atlas. What can you see on the atlas that's different than any other vertebrae that you've seen? It's really wide. It's missing something. Doesn't have a spinous process. Yep. Sure. What else about it? Doesn't have a body. There's no body on it. Sure. So if what you may be given a picture of this, of the atlas on a quiz, it doesn't have a body, and that's the only one that does not have a body on it, is the atlas. Does anybody know, we've talked about it a little bit with some of you guys, but where the name atlas comes from? It's Greek. It comes from Greek mythology. So I guess quick story time, or not, I don't know. But when the Titans were fighting the Greek gods and they lost, well then Zeus sent Atlas to carry the world on his back. So the atlas of your vertebrae is carrying the world, your head, the big globe, or whatever you want to call it, on itself. So that's where the name comes from. So Atlas carries the world on his back. Atlas, the other atlas, the vertebrae, carries its head. Touch the head. I don't know if that helps anybody. Yeah. I just looked up that story just before I started, so I didn't do it right. But, you know, I'm like, maybe they want to know it. It's kind of cool. And then axis. So axis is right below it. What can you see on the axis that's probably different than anything else? So on the left one, you can see it best. Odontoid process. It does, yep. And you'll learn that the rest of them have that as well. But specifically, it has the dens, it's called. And what the dens is, it allows your head to move this way. It's like it rotates. The atlas rotates on the dens. Do I have a hoop? I need like a circle thing. That's bad. I don't know. Anyway, so it allows your head to turn left and right, that little process. It sticks up and it acts as a axis for it to turn on. Is everybody good on that? Does it make sense? Doing my best to just identify those two in particular. Okay, cervical vertebrae. There is two main things I would say on cervical vertebrae. I know you guys can't see. I'll turn it around. Do my best. That are different than the rest of the vertebrae. And one of which is the spinous process. So, yeah, that's just turn to the next page on 230. And that top picture there is a cervical vertebrae. And can you tell me something that's different about the cervical vertebrae that's not the same as the other two below it? The spinous process? Yeah, the bifid spinous process. So cervical vertebrae have two at the end. Oh, can I draw it? I'll do my best. So body goes like this, comes around, and then the spinous process comes out like this. Well, the cervical vertebrae has two, kind of like that, for spinous process. It makes 2 points, and it's called the bifid spinous process. Bi meaning what? All right, cool. So that's one way. And then additionally, what are the things that stick out to the side? What are they called? Transverse process. So make a drawing like this. So on cervical vertebrae, the transverse process have a hole in it called the what? What does that say? Transverse foramen. Yep. So that's another way to identify. The transverse process has a foramen through it, or a hole. Oh, I'm sorry. Body. Looks like what? Oh, I can see that.
Yeah. Like it's a pacifier that's like sitting on like a little like what are those things that you like spin that are like really small?
Fidget spinner?
No, they like
Um,
like they look like a little I have a dancer that did it. Oh yeah, you press the button and it goes like shoo. No, you pull the string out and you like let go of the string and it spins.
all right. So what are two things you can identify a cervical vertebrae with?
Spinous process
Mm-hmm.
and
Come out.
transverse
Transverse foramen. Yep. There's holes in the foramen, and that's where I forget. The accessory. It's number 11. A nerve runs through that, and then there's also the. Do you remember? Not vagus. It's the. I forget. It runs along the spinal cord and assists. I can't remember. I'll get back to you on that, but.
Is it true that's the cervical plexus then too?
Yes. Yep.
Nerve.
Well, the cervical plexus runs outward from the spine itself through there, but accessory. It's an accessory nerve to the spinal cord. But yeah, so foramen and bifid spinous process are the two identifying features of the cervical vertebrae. What are two that are completely different than the rest of them? C1 and C2. Atlas and axis. What does axis have where you can tell that it's that? The dens. What about the atlas? Doesn't have a body. Yep. Yep. Okay, I'm going to erase this. Then we move on to the transverse. Keep on losing my marker. Good one. Awesome. What? Oh, is it? Thank you. Transverse. So the transverse thoracic vertebrae, I keep on saying transverse. Thoracic vertebrae are the only vertebrae that touch the ribs. So their identifying features would be the facets that articulate with the head of the rib and the tubercle of the rib. So if you're looking on 230, that middle one is the thoracic vertebrae, and you can see that it has a spot that rubs up against the rib. It's the best way to tell. Other than that, they're pretty normal compared to the rest of the ribs. Does that make sense? Cool. And then and then we'll move on to the lumbar. The lumbar have no identifying features. So they have a large body, I suppose you could say. But in terms of like things that set them apart from the rest of the vertebrae, they really don't have it. So if there's nothing special to the vertebrae, a picture of a vertebrae we give you, what would you call it? Lumbar. Yep. Have you talked about the different parts of the vertebrae themselves?
No.
Oh, okay. This is the
our
first time. Oh, okay. Well, sorry about that. Then what do we need to know? Okay, so I'm just going to draw an average vertebrae. So this is a standard vertebrae. So this would be we've talked about it, spinous process. How about the ones to the sides? Okay. What what is this? The body. Would anybody happen to know? Oh, okay. Maybe you do. So the vertebral foramen. What runs through the vertebral foramen? Yep. Roll. Probably don't have to know lamina or pedicle. That's it. Yep. So this is your just like base vertebrae. There's nothing special to it. There will also be, we had superior articular facet on it too, right? On the board with the words. You added that. Yep. So that will be, if you look on page 230, they all have it. And so let's go with the middle one. It's right here for the thoracic. Sits right there. And so what that is where the vertebrae sit on each other. That's how they move. So when you twist your spine, it's the superior articular facet. There's an inferior as well, but we won't talk about that just because we won't see it in your quizzes. But that's where they rub against each other. So it allows that right there. Yeah. Any questions about just a standard vertebrae? No? Okay. Does anybody know how many vertebrae are in each section by chance? 5. So how I remember how I was taught, whatever. So breakfast at 7, lunch at 12, supper at 5. Easy enough? Okay. I'll right beside it. Oh, not lunch. Sick and lumbar. How about, okay, so then I'll move down to the sacrum. The sacrum is just fused vertebrae. That's what it is. And there's 5 of them, 5 fused vertebrae there. So I'll do 5 for sacrum. And then, does anybody know coccyx, which is also just fused vertebrae? 3. Should be 3. Does it say 4? Oh. Oh, it does say 4. Okay. Well, it's different than what I... 4 for the coccyx. 2C. So that's how it is. Lunch, or breakfast, lunch, supper, dinner, whatever you want to call it. So let's say know it know it. And if you forget it, it might not be that big a deal. I don't know. But I think it's important, personally. Okay, so let's start talking about one more thing with the lumbar. Why do you think the body on the lumbar are so large? Yep, they have the most weight. Yep, so as you move down the vertebral column, more weight gets added because the cervical vertebrae only really need to hold up the head. And then once you get into the thoracic, then it's holding up the arms and the lungs and that kind of stuff. And then once you get down to the lumbar, well, it's got all of the abdominal organs there. So there's more weight. So it needs to be larger to just spread out the energy that's from an impact on those vertebrae. Cool. So let's talk about the ribs and the thoracic vertebrae. I'm just going to erase this. So what we're talking about facets that were written on the board. What were the 2 facets that we wrote that articulate with the ribs? Written down. Yep. The facet that articulates with the rib head and the facet that articulates with the rib tubercle. And so where that will be, let's go ahead. I'm going to come around. And then there'll be a tubercle here. And then the neck. Like that. So this is what a rib looks like, pretty close. And so we have the head here. The neck will be right here. And then the tubercle will be so those are the three parts. Oh, and then the sternal end is how what they call it in the book. Yeah, anterior end or sternal end. So I'll go sternal end. And that's on page 234, if you guys want to look at that, or turn to that. And that shows a better picture of the head, the neck, and the tubercle of the rib. So looking on the picture below it, there's two spots where the rib touches the vertebrae. Where are those two spots? Yep. And you can just give me the parts, like on here. The tubercle and the body, would you say? Sure. So, being said, which way's front? If I took this vertebrae and put it normal, which way would the front of the body be? Is this back? Or then this is front? Okay, so this is posterior. I gotta stop writing it sideways. So this is the posterior end. So that means if I laid this flat, then this would be facing forward. So which way would the rib curl around? So it's going to attach to the body, right? So the rib's going to start here. And then it's going to curl up that way. The transverse process is going to actually come out just a little bit like that. This is where the facet is. So what would I name this spot that touches the rib? Yep, it's the facet that articulates with the head of the rib. Facet articulates head of rib. How about this one right here? Yep. So, facet that with rib. So they name themselves, right? So the head of the rib articulates with the facet that articulates with the head of the rib. It's not too terribly tough. Is everybody clear on that? I've been moving fast. And then what we call this right here? The sternal end. Oh, we're about to. Good call. So I think, any questions for me right before we're done? No? All good? Excellent. All right. We will catch you next time.